Do you think Africa can ever be visa-free?
No, here is the best example, but I told him that, yes, as an investor, as somebody who really wants to make Africa great, I have to now apply 35 different visas.
Even after decades of independence from colonial rule, Africa still struggles to achieve the freedom of movement that its people deserve. Historically, visa systems served as tools for colonial masters to generate revenue and exert control over their colonies. Today, these same systems continue to serve the interests of certain leaders who, whether knowingly or not, maintain policies that benefit from these restrictions, often at the expense of their citizens. The question remains, will Africa ever become a continent where travel is unrestricted, allowing its people to move freely across borders? Let's find out. In the era of globalization and regional integration, Africa occupies a strategic position. The continent, blessed with so much culture, resources, and history, is divided by policies that still keep on segregating the communities. Among these divisive policies, one stands out, more so the necessity for visas within the African countries. As the world goes forward with free movement, the same cannot be said for Africa, which is stuck with wall-like barriers limiting the movement of its citizens.
Mr. Dangote, you have previously complained about the difficulty of traveling on a Nigerian passport across the continent. Has it become easier?
Even an hour ago, I complained to President Kagame.
This problem has emerged on the agenda of the African countries lately, owing to Tunisia's support of the Sahara Alliance of Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger. This union, which aims at having more control and independence and fighting neo-colonialism, has gained a strong partner in Tunisia. But Tunisia's support is not one of pinning words on a motionless body in a game of political chess. The core of Tunisia's support can be found in a rather sharp critique of the current visa regimes that have effectively continued to dismantle the African continent. Minister of Foreign Affairs of Tunisia Nabil Amar, going out with the tone requesting the execution of such policies, pointed to the fact that they are disadvantageous not only to African integration, but also contrary to the European model of freedom of movement. Let's begin by examining why the issue of visa fees between African countries is so significant and what impact it has on the continent's unity.
At least you can come here visa-free.
No, here is the best example, but I told him that, yes, as an investor, as somebody who really wants to make Africa great, I have to now apply 35 different visas on my passport. And I told Mr. President, I said, Mr. President, I really don't have the time to go and be dropping my passports in embassies to get it.
To grasp the full significance of the visa issue, it is crucial to examine the historical context in which these policies were formulated. The modern borders that define Africa's nations today were largely drawn during the colonial era, a period marked by the imposition of external rule and authority over the African continent by European powers. These borders were often outlined with minimal consideration for the ethnic, cultural, and linguistic complexities of the indigenous populations residing within those artificial boundaries.
2 years.
This is a story of mass exploitation, of the ecstasy of independence, and of how, with liberation, a new scramble.
The primary objective of these borders was to serve the strategic and economic interests of the colonial powers, rather than to reflect or accommodate the lived realities of the African people.
European imperialism in Africa set up the continent to be raped, its resources just sucked out.
As a consequence, when African nations achieved independence in the mid-20th century, they inherited not only these arbitrarily imposed borders, but also a governing framework that was deeply entrenched in the colonial logic of control and division. This framework, which was more concerned with maintaining order and authority than with promoting national unity or social cohesion, has continued to influence the political and administrative structures of many African states. The visa policies that emerged within this context are thus not merely bureaucratic measures, but are deeply rooted in a colonial legacy that prioritized the interests of external powers over the well-being and unity of African societies.
Political systems were completely destroyed. Leaders were arrested, put in jail.
Now the question is, what caused the continuation of this policy? Here's a reminder to please like and share the video and subscribe to our channel to watch more videos on Black culture, history, civilization, and identity. Let's continue now. The ongoing enforcement of visa requirements within Africa can be viewed as a continuation of the colonial legacy that has long influenced the continent's political and social structures. By upholding these restrictive measures, African nations may unintentionally perpetuate the divisions that were originally imposed by colonial rulers. These visa policies are not just administrative formalities, they stand as symbols of a continent still struggling to break free from the vestiges of its colonial history. The borders that were drawn to serve the interests of colonial powers continue to act as barriers, maintaining artificial separations that disregard the cultural and ethnic realities of African societies. The economic impact of these visa requirements is both significant and far-reaching. By making it more difficult for Africans to travel within their continent, these policies create substantial obstacles to trade, tourism, and investment. Small and medium-sized enterprises and SMEs, which are vital to the economies of many African nations, face particular challenges. The financial and logistical burdens of obtaining visas for cross-border trade limit their ability to expand beyond their home markets. This constraint not only hampers economic growth, but also exacerbates the economic disparities that exist between African nations.
You see, the most annoying thing is that, yes, if you are treating everybody the same, then I can understand. You know, I can assure you, Patrick doesn't need 35 visas. No, I said that. What I'm saying, you have...
You do not... You don't need 35 visas on a French passport compared to a Nigerian passport.
35 visas on French passport.
No.
Moreover, the tourism sector, which has the potential to be a powerful engine of economic development across Africa, suffers from the negative effects of visa restrictions. African tourists, who could contribute to the growth of intracontinental tourism, are often deterred by the complex and time-consuming visa processes. This results in lost opportunities for economic gain, as well as missed chances for fostering cultural exchange and mutual understanding among the diverse peoples of Africa. The social and cultural repercussions of visa policies are equally profound. By limiting the free movement of people, these policies reduce the chances for cultural exchange and mutual understanding among African nations. In a continent as culturally rich and diverse as Africa, where a wide array of languages, traditions, and customs coexist, the ability to engage in cross-cultural dialogue is essential for promoting unity and collaboration. Visa restrictions also deepen social divisions, reinforcing a sense of otherness between people from different African nations. Rather than promoting a shared African identity, these barriers often make citizens feel like foreigners in neighboring countries. This undermines the ideals of Pan-Africanism, a movement dedicated to the solidarity and unity of African peoples, and contributes to the persistence of xenophobia and inter-ethnic tensions. Politically, the issue of visa requirements highlights a broader challenge facing Africa: the tension between national sovereignty and continental unity. Many African leaders are hesitant to relinquish control over their borders, viewing this control as a critical component of their national sovereignty. However, this insistence on maintaining strict national borders comes at the expense of the broader goal of African unity. The critique expressed by Tunisian officials, such as Nabil Amar, suggests that African leaders need to reconsider their priorities. Instead of clinging to outdated notions of sovereignty, there is a growing need to work towards a more integrated and cooperative continent. By eliminating visa restrictions, African nations could take a significant step toward realizing the vision of a united Africa, where borders are no longer seen as dividing lines, but as connections that bring people together.
Nigeria and South Africa are continuing consultations on resolving visa-related issues affecting both sides. Well, this time, the Controller General of the Nigerian Immigration Service, who is in South Africa, has met with officials of South Africa's Home Affairs Department in the capital city, Pretoria. The long periods Nigerians have to wait to get South African visas, as well as the visa duration, were some of the concerns raised. Our correspondent, Betty Divya.
But what about the European visa system? If they imposed a visa system in Africa, does a visa system also exist in Europe? Europe's Schengen area is frequently heralded as one of the most successful examples of regional integration in the contemporary world. Unlike Africa, where visa restrictions continue to pose significant challenges, the Schengen Agreement allows citizens of member states to travel freely across borders without the need for visas. This freedom of movement has facilitated unprecedented levels of economic cooperation, cultural exchange, and political unity within Europe. The Schengen Agreement, signed in 1985, marked a pivotal moment in European history. By eliminating internal border controls between participating states, the agreement laid the groundwork for the creation of a single market in which goods, services, people, and capital could move freely. This freedom of movement has been a cornerstone of Europe's economic success, enabling businesses to expand their operations across national borders, workers to seek employment opportunities in other countries, and tourists to explore the continent without the bureaucratic burden of obtaining visas. So, it is made sure in Western nations that benefits are provided to locals. But when it came to Africans, the West didn't care about anything but money.
But, so which means you have a freer movement than myself in Africa.
Yeah, but you have, I remember that there are 3 countries, Uganda, Kenya, and Rwanda. You have 1 visa for the free when you are a tourist.
This is true.
I've done it. So it's good. So you can.
Now the question is, what will happen if Africa becomes visa-free? Beyond the economic advantages, a visa-free Africa could have transformative effects on social cohesion and political unity. By facilitating increased interaction among people from different African nations, the continent could begin to heal the divisions that have long characterized its history. Such a development would not only help to foster a stronger sense of African identity, but also enhance the capacity of African nations to collaborate on shared challenges, including security, development, and environmental sustainability. However, the path to implementing a visa-free Africa is fraught with challenges. One of the most significant obstacles is the issue of trust between African nations. Unlike Europe, where the Schengen Agreement was built upon a foundation of decades of cooperation, integration, and mutual trust, Africa's history is marked by deep-seated mistrust between nations, often rooted in colonial-era borders and conflicts. This historical legacy has left many African leaders wary of relinquishing control over their borders, which they perceive as a critical aspect of their national sovereignty. To overcome these challenges, African leaders would need to embark on a comprehensive process of confidence building, aimed at establishing the legal and institutional frameworks necessary to support a visa-free continent. This would involve harmonizing visa policies, as well as addressing critical issues such as border security, law enforcement, and migration management. Furthermore, it would require a commitment to greater transparency, accountability, and cooperation at both the national and regional levels. The importance of strong and visionary leadership in this process cannot be overstated. For the vision of a visa-free Africa to become a reality, African leaders must be willing to transcend narrow national interests and work collaboratively towards the greater good of the continent. This will necessitate a fundamental shift in mindset, moving away from an exclusive focus on national sovereignty and towards a broader vision of continental unity and integration. Tunisia's endorsement of the Sahara Alliance, coupled with its call for a visa-free Africa, represents a bold and forward-looking step in this direction. By challenging the status quo and advocating for greater integration, Tunisia is setting a powerful example for other African nations to follow. However, the success of this initiative will ultimately hinge on the willingness of other African leaders to embrace this vision and work together to bring it to fruition. Now the question is, what role do African leaders play in maintaining the status quo, and how do their actions hinder the continent's progress towards unity? Tunisia's critique of African leadership, as articulated by Foreign Minister Nabil Amar, was perhaps the most controversial aspect of its endorsement of the Sahara Alliance. Amar's speech was a scathing indictment of the current state of African leadership, accusing certain leaders of perpetuating the divisions that have long hindered the continent's progress. He referred to these leaders as mafias, a term that suggests not just corruption, but a deep-seated culture of exploitation. The term mafias is a powerful one, evoking images of organized crime, corruption, and the abuse of power. In the context of African leadership, it refers to those who profit from the current visa system, using it as a tool to enrich themselves at the expense of their fellow Africans. These leaders, according to Amar, are not merely maintaining the status quo, they are actively exploiting it, creating barriers to unity that serve their interests rather than those of the continent as a whole. This exploitation takes many forms. For some leaders, the visa system is a source of revenue, with visa fees providing a steady stream of income that can be used to fund their agendas. For others, the control over borders and the movement of people is a means of maintaining power, allowing them to exert control over who can enter and leave their countries. This focus on national borders and sovereignty, while understandable in the context of Africa's colonial history, is a significant obstacle to the continent's progress. The actions of these leaders have a profound impact on African unity. By maintaining strict visa policies and enforcing borders that were imposed during the colonial era, they are perpetuating the divisions that have long plagued the continent. This not only hinders economic cooperation and cultural exchange, but also undermines the broader goal of Pan-Africanism, a vision of a united Africa that transcends national borders and embraces a shared identity. Tunisia's critique suggests that African leaders need to reevaluate their priorities. Instead of focusing on maintaining control and profiting from the visa system, they should be working towards greater integration and cooperation. This would not only benefit their citizens but also strengthen Africa's position on the global stage. By removing visa restrictions and embracing a vision of a borderless Africa, African leaders could help to create a continent that is more united, prosperous, and resilient in the face of external challenges. One of the key obstacles to achieving this vision is the issue of national sovereignty. Many African leaders are reluctant to cede control over their borders, viewing it as a necessary component of their sovereignty. This reluctance is understandable, given the continent's history of colonialism and the struggle for independence. However, Tunisia's critique suggests that this focus on sovereignty may be misguided, particularly in the context of a globalized world where regional integration is increasingly seen as a key driver of economic growth and political stability. To overcome this obstacle, African leaders will need to adopt a more nuanced understanding of sovereignty, one that recognizes the benefits of regional cooperation and integration, even if it means ceding some control over national borders. This will require a fundamental shift in mindset, away from the narrow focus on national interests and towards a broader vision of continental unity. It will also require a willingness to engage in dialogue and cooperation with other African nations, building the trust and confidence necessary to support a visa-free Africa. Here, alliances like ECOWAS could have said something, but did they play any role? The African Union AU and the Economic Community of West African States ECOWAS are two of the most influential regional organizations in Africa. Tasked with promoting peace, security, and integration across the continent, these organizations play a crucial role in shaping the future of Africa. However, Tunisia's critique suggests that they may be focusing on the wrong issues, particularly when it comes to enforcing constitutional orders in countries like Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger. According to Tunisia, the AU and ECOWAS are often preoccupied with addressing external influences, such as the presence of foreign powers like France in West Africa. While these are undoubtedly important issues, Tunisia argues that they should not take precedence over more pressing internal matters, such as the need for a visa-free Africa.
We do not recognize ECOWAS protocol anymore. Guta, sana mokano.
A useless organization.
Oh!
It doesn't actually exist.
Oh!
I'm telling you.
By focusing on external influences, the AU and ECOWAS risk being distracted from the real issues that affect the continent's unity. Tunisia's stance is that these organizations should prioritize making Africa a borderless continent, where citizens can move freely, conduct business, and engage in cultural exchange without the constraints of visa requirements. Tunisia's critique calls for a re-evaluation of the priorities of the AU and ECOWAS. Instead of simply reacting to external pressures, these organizations should be leading the charge toward greater integration within Africa. This would involve not only advocating for visa-free travel, but also working to harmonize policies and regulations across the continent, creating a more cohesive and united Africa. To achieve this, the AU and ECOWAS would need to adopt a more proactive approach, focusing on the issues that matter most to African citizens. This could involve launching initiatives to promote economic cooperation, supporting cross-border infrastructure projects, and encouraging cultural exchange programs. By doing so, these organizations could help to create a more integrated and prosperous Africa, where the benefits of unity are shared by all. Tunisia's endorsement of the Sahara Alliance and its subsequent call for a visa-free Africa mark a pivotal moment in the continent's journey toward unity. By bringing attention to the visa issue, Tunisia has challenged African leaders and organizations to rethink their priorities and focus on fostering greater cooperation within the continent. The idea of a visa-free Africa is not just a dream, but a tangible goal that could lead to a more integrated and prosperous future for the continent. As Africa continues to grapple with its internal and external challenges, Tunisia's bold stand serves as a reminder of what is possible when nations come together in the spirit of unity and cooperation. While the path to achieving a visa-free Africa is fraught with challenges, the potential benefits, in terms of economic growth, social cohesion, and political unity, are immense. It is now up to African leaders, organizations, and citizens to embrace this vision and work together to make it a reality.
Question of will, but I think all what is moving on about community between Africa, it's up to the African leaders to decide, will be good for Africa.
Yes, but it will change. And what I keep saying, right now our main job is to make sure the regional markets, they all work. Okay? Once they work, then we can now go to AFCTA. But the AFCTA also, we need to make sure that it works. We cannot have a very promising continent and our intra-trade is less than 16%. Okay, so we Africans will have to do it. If we are waiting for foreigners to come and do it, both the development of Africa, it's not going to happen. So it can only happen by us Africans. We must risk our resources and make sure that we lead. Then we will have people who actually trust and believe in Africa, like Patrick, to come and help us to push to the next level.
Do you also want to see a visa-free Africa? Has this ever bothered you? Why do you think leaders are not taking action yet? Let us know in the comment section who you think is responsible. Do you want to watch more videos like this one? If so, subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon next to it. We have decided to bring videos on something nobody talks about: the Black culture, civilization, history, and evidence about how glorious Blacks have been. Thanks for watching, and until the next video, stay tuned.